Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hey
Jai.
Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Bol.
So I'm just looking up the page here, and I'm trying to close a few windows while I'm at this. I'll be with you in one moment, please.
I'm on Zoom right
now.
No, I'm on Gaura Zoom.
Gorda, your sound is very soft.
Mine?
No, yours is loud.
Oh.
Gorda is soft. For me.
I'm soft. Okay, I lowered my voice because I tend to get excited and my voice gets loud. I didn't want to be disruptive, so I softened myself. Okay, here we are. Okay, great. I found the page. Am I at a decent volume right now? Can you hear me?
Now it's okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Great. All right. So, the view, speaker view. I'll share the screen now. All right. So, the order I have after me is Purnaprajna, then Bhagavat Maharaj, then Rupanuga Prabhu, then Krishna Chandra. So Purnaprajna Prabhu, did you want to start or shall I start?
As you like. You know where we're beginning?
Page 63.
Yes.
In 1944.
Yeah, but I just thought we'd quote Barbara McClintock from just a little paragraph before, just to give us a little context to what we were reading.
Okay.
Empiric evidence proving that random genetic mutations and natural selection were wholly inadequate explanations of the purposeful genetic engineering found in DNA has been with us for a long time. Dr. Barbara McClintock, who won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1983, said in her acceptance speech, quote, "In the future, attention undoubtedly will be centered on the genome, with greater appreciation of its significance as a highly sensitive organ of the cell that monitors genomic activities and corrects common errors, senses unusual and unexpected events, and responds to them, often by restructuring the genome," unquote. In 1944, McClintock had bombarded chromosomes in corn plants with moderate doses of radiation to break them so that they couldn't reproduce. She then saw that since the information was lost, the plants got code from other chromosomes and repaired the damage. That is to say, they reprogrammed themselves. She was the first person to observe this, and she went to a symposium at Cold Spring Harbor, New York, and presented her findings. The other scientists simply laughed and made fun of her. Just consider how this was 1944, and yet almost 40 years later, she was proven right and awarded the Nobel Prize. The lesson to be learned is that when an ideology or theory becomes established in mainstream academia, it takes a long time for it to become debunked, even if there is clear empirical evidence disproving it. Then in 2019, William J. Kalin Jr., Sir Peter J. Ratcliffe, and Greg L. Semenza jointly won the Nobel Prize for Medicine. They had discovered that cells could rewrite their own DNA as oxygen levels change. Precisely how cells attain such intentionality and how they continue to react to new situations and modify their own code still eludes researchers. Thus, it is now understood that genomes are not simply ROM or read-only memories, for the cell can rewrite the genome as well. It is clear that even the simplest cell could not possibly have arisen by an unguided or mindless process, and yet, because scientism is the religion of today's intelligentsia, people in general are systematically indoctrinated to believe that life randomly evolved from chemicals. It is something like partisan politics. The worldview is primary and the observable evidence is secondary. The neo-Darwinists want to understand the origin of life by purely naturalistic means and become livid when someone suggests that a transcendent consciousness or mind must have arranged the information contained in DNA. In order to quiet the heated debate between intelligent design theory and neo-Darwinism, a growing number of prominent scientists are proposing what they call a third way. They have created a demilitarized zone between the two camps by leaving aside the origin of life and postulating that since random mutation cannot account for the new information required for constructing new life forms, there must be subtle, unknown laws of nature at work. The thirdwayevolution.com, under the direction of Denis Noble, a highly respected biologist who was a professor emeritus of computational physiology at the University of Oxford and who had organized the conference at the Royal Academy in London in 2016, has assembled more than 100 respected scientists. The website has stated its position, quote, "Neo-Darwinism is clearly naturalistic science, but ignores much contemporary molecular evidence and invokes a set of unsupported assumptions about the accidental nature of hereditary variation. Neo-Darwinism ignores important rapid evolutionary processes such as symbiogenesis, horizontal DNA transfer, action of mobile DNA, and epigenetic modifications. Moreover, some neo-Darwinists have elevated natural selection into a creative force that solves all the difficult evolutionary problems without a real empirical basis. Many scientists today see the need for a deeper and more complete exploration of all aspects of the evolutionary process," unquote. The main problem facing evolutionary scientists is answering the question, quote, "Where does the information in DNA come from?" unquote. So far, there is no scientific theory that can explain this. Denis Noble has teamed up with Perry Marshall and is one of the judges of a $10 million prize for anyone who can show how coded information can evolve by natural laws. Is there any comments or questions on this section?
Wow. Yeah, I have a whole bunch of them.
Go for it.
First of all, Srila Prabhupada told in a letter to Swarup Damodar that every cell in creation has a soul. Every cell in your body, every cell that structures everything has a soul. So the soul in that letter, the conception is, or the understanding is, that cell is one living entity. and the soul is the director of the activities of that living entity. Yet the consciousness which expands from the soul, and this is explained in Gita 1334. In Bhagavad Gita 1334, Krishna explains that the soul is in the area of the heart within the body, and then expanding from the soul is consciousness. So the consciousness expands from the soul, the master soul, in the area of the heart of the human body. And that consciousness influences the consciousness of all the individual souls in every cell to work in harmony with it. And yet, those individual souls, their consciousness become affected by the nature of the consciousness of the master soul in the area of the heart. There's examples of people who've had heart transplants. And this one guy in particular, it's a famous one, he was a couch potato, overweight, many different conditions. He had a heart condition, he had to get a new heart, all this, all the usual typical symptoms of a lazy, TV watching, junk food eating couch potato. Okay. The guy who died, who donated his heart, his head got crushed in an accident. The guy was 25 years old, and he was what they call an extreme athlete. And he died while doing a stunt in a movie with a car crash. And his brain got destroyed and his heart was used, and he got the heart. So he got the heart of this extreme athlete. His whole life changed. He gave up, eating all the junk food. He started eating a healthy diet. He started exercising. He then started bicycling. He became, in his age category, because he was like in his 60s, in his age category, he became a champion cyclist. So there was some transfer of the consciousness in the cells of the heart of that person, which influenced the consciousness of the master soul in the heart. As Prabhupada explained, when you get a new heart simply means you change the apartment. The heart comes out and the soul comes in. He says you're just changing the apartment. But doesn't answer the question of the residue of consciousness that the cells in the heart muscle from the previous owner carry with it some information which is now influencing the consciousness of the master soul. This is just one thing that came to my mind. There's a number of other things. I mean, I could make so many different comments, but this is just one thing that came to my mind. Understanding that there's a soul in every cell. The Swarup Damodar gives an example to Prabhupada of I think it was corn. They did an experiment where they removed all the calcium from the corn. I have to get you the detail. I don't remember exactly what it was. The seed. It was a seed, and they removed all the calcium from the seed. And so then what they did was they put the seed in a kind of water that doesn't have any minerals, like distilled water. It had no minerals in it, had absolutely nothing, to just keep it alive and see what happened. And even though it wasn't fed any nutrition or any minerals, and it was in a water milieu that had no minerals in it, the calcium increased. So when he explained this to Prabhupada in the conversation, Prabhupada said, yes, this is proof that there's a soul. The soul is in the cell, the soul is in the seed, and the soul has directed that the calcium should increase. And so this is, they're just taking it down one notch and they're saying, well, the DNA is rewriting this. I have a couple of chapters from a book of one guy who explains how the DNA makes voice signals, sounds that signal to different parts of the rest of the DNA. And there was one musician, I have a recording, he was able to hear the sounds and he made a song, music, not a song, but just music based on the sound vibrations he was getting from the DNA. So it's very interesting how there's, sound, which, Prabhupada always talked about, you have to hear. Hearing is what makes everything happen. Hear the Srimad Bhagavatam, hear from the lips of the pure devotee, hear the transcendental sound vibration, chanting Hare Krishna, hear, hear, hear. So this sound is there in the DNA, and the DNA has a sound vibration that it produces, and this supports what Srila Prabhupada says in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, in the 26th chapter, verse 32, that everything that we see in the material world comes from sound. Everything that we see comes from sound. Sound vibration is the fundamental basis of everything that we see in the world. And so how this DNA is doing all of this is because of the soul consciousness within the cells, and that soul and the consciousness of that soul is directing the activities of the DNA to function like this. Without the soul, it doesn't. If you make an artificial strand of DNA, it won't function. As soon as you insert one piece of living DNA into that strand, it begins to activate because the soul is present. So synthetic DNA won't work on its own. This is, again, evidence that there's a consciousness in the living DNA as opposed to the synthetic DNA.
Well, the thrust of our discussion has been not that. It's been a discussion of the design of the cell itself. Whether the spirit soul is in there or not, the spirit soul did not design the cell. The cell was designed by the super soul or the supreme soul.
Yeah.
This is our point, is that the design of the cell itself, the intricacies which are magnified
Absolutely.
out into a microscope, are not, they may be or not be operating by a soul there, but the design of the cell was done by a higher intelligence.
Right. Yeah. No,
higher than the intelligence of an individual soul.
Yeah. Okay.
The body,
No
master
problem.
soul, whatever you want to call it. We're concentrating on the fact of the intricacy, the complication of it could not be evolved by chance or by natural selection or by mutations.
Correct.
Okay, that's the point. The point at which Darwinism and neo-Darwinism cannot answer. They cannot provide any answer. They cannot explain where the information comes from. The information comes from the designer of that. The whole information is built in. The program is built in, just like it may take a soul to start the embryo moving, attached to the wall of the uterus of the womb. But that design that unfolds, that's all designed by the Supreme Personality of God. How it unfolds, it's not coming directed by the soul. It's directed by the program that's involved in the very matter that surrounds the soul. That whole design is there from the beginning. That's what we're.
That's the creator, and the soul is the animator. It animates the body of the baby, but the super soul is what makes the body work.
Srila Prabhupada explains in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita purport that spirit soul energizes the passing red corpuscles.
Yeah.
So, and that causing fusion, which
Right.
means the heat of the body heat, the temperature comes from the presence of the spirit soul. I wrote him a letter asking, do you mean, well, this is 68, I wrote him a letter, do you mean fusion means that body temperature? And he said back, yes. So super soul, the spirit soul is active, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But our point is the design of the heart, the design of the body, and design of individual soul, individual cell is a design by a higher intelligence.
Yeah. Okay.
That's our point.
No, I have no reason with that.
Right. In addition with that is that the point of showing the intricacies of the self shows that, but it also shows that the observer, the person who's noting this through the telescope or the microscope, and the person who experiences is himself not that. The person is not the body. He's not the cell. It's the spirit soul. We're after the spirit soul in the heart as being separate from the rest of the body.
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't matter whether the influence is there. Our point is, and this is the biggest point facing the world today, everybody's in the illusion that they're their bodies.
Yeah.
So the ultimate point of this book is to come to the point of people understanding they're not their bodies, and they're not the overseer or the master or the designer of the body.
Yeah, I got you. I understand, but who are they? They're the soul. They're not the super soul. So it's important that we understand that the soul is in every cell, and that the soul is there in the heart, and the consciousness emanates from the soul.
Whatever the soul does in a cell is limited by the design of the cell.
Yeah, true.
See, the design of the cell is not coming from the individual soul.
No, I didn't indicate that, but
No.
the soul, what Prabhupada said to Swarup Damodar when he explained to him that the calcium was produced there, he said, yes, because consciousness is present, the soul is present, so therefore it happens. In other words, without animation, the body would not live. The structure of it and how it functions is all designed by super soul.
Yes. And not only that, the super soul is giving the intelligence. Intelligence, the subtle body intelligence is a form direction of the super soul.
Right.
In addition to that, we've got demigods who are in control of various limbs and parcels of the body.
Yeah, demigods are in control of every part of your body. This is why in Vedic culture, they worship all these different demigods in an effort to get them to give them peace in their body. But that's why Prabhupada said, all of this is not necessary. You worship the supreme personality of Godhead.
Right, of course.
Everyone is satisfied.
But thing is, we were on a page here, page 63, and what we've been doing on these meetings is reading the book.
Okay.
And basing our conversation or discussion on the book.
Okay. All right. I mean, I apologize. You asked if there was any comments.
Yeah, but we're trying to limit our comments to Gora has introduced another book at length, but our purpose of being here is to discuss Purnaprajna's book.
Okay.
Because this book is written from the point of view of devotional service. That other book wasn't.
What other book?
The one he was quoting from.
Who was quoting from?
Gora was just reading at length a book written by a non-devotee. And we're here to discuss a book written by a devotee.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know. He said that you were reading Purnaprajna's book, so I just assumed that what he was reading was Purnaprajna's book.
It wasn't Purnaprajna's book. That was somebody.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that. I had no idea.
Well, that's why I'm calling back, getting back on track here.
Okay, that's fine.
What we read was the book.
Huh?
What we read was my book.
Yeah.
What Gora read was my book.
He did read your book.
Yeah.
Yes. I was reading from his book. Yes.
Well, who was that person you were quoting before? You quoted some other scientist. We
Or
couldn't
some
tell-
scientists
couldn't-
you quoted in your book, right, Purnaprajna?
Yeah, I'm confused.
All right, hey, well, let's go on with the reading.
Everything I was reading was from Purnaprajna Prabhu's book, quoting.
Okay, where'd you leave off?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get back to that. Thank you. Okay, so it's your turn to read Purnaprajna Prabhu.
Okay.
We're reading a page each.
Harry Marshall explains what coded information entails, as paraphrased here. Code is only code in a context. You must have encoding, coded information, and decoding. Suppose I were to take your hard drive and look at the contents with an electron microscope. All I would see are ones and zeros. This would tell me nothing about the information contained in the hard drive. Only in the context does it have meaning. 1001 is A and 10010 is B. In order to have code, you must have an encoder and decoder, and this is exactly what you have in cell replication. You have transcription and translation. The DNA code is transcribed into RNA and then translated into amino acids. That is encoder, message, and decoder. The $10 million prize, if you can make encoder, message, and decoder emerge from some emergent property or some law of physics, or however you can get it to happen, then you get the prize. While being interviewed along with Perry Marshall by Ryan Bissett, Dennis Nobel opined that this prize will never be won. Why? It is an observable fact that specified information, meaning information used to convey a message or instructions, can only be formed by a person and not blindly. Some of Perry Marshall's statements from that interview are herein paraphrased. You must distinguish between origin of life and origin of species. As for origin of life, there is not much that qualifies as science. It's a mystery. The origin of information problem has not been solved. I advocate intelligent design, lowercase I and lowercase d, in the broadest sense, that the universe is an amazing place and it speaks of something more amazing being, having created it. The universe is a consciousness first, matter second phenomenon, instead of the other way around. A bacteria can do more software engineering in 12 minutes than a team of Google software engineers can do in 12 weeks. The problem with the neo-Darwinists is that the science is not on their side, and so they feel threatened. Evolution is kind of a city person topic. People living in the city do not know how amazing nature is. City people become disconnected from nature. Thus, city people believe legends of how nature got to be this way, and they believe it. If you think that nature is a series of random accidents, then I think you need a vacation. If someone reads the descriptions of what is going on in the cell, they should understand how amazing it is and realize that this is so much bigger than us. The Darwinian idea that we are just the products of random, purposeless happenings is disempowering and depressing. People need hope. If we are taught that we are purposeless, then how will we treat the environment? That is what we are seeing now. Does God exist? I think that it's obvious. Everyone knows that God exists, but to be an atheist, you must tell yourself a very convoluted story in order to convince yourself that God does not exist. Every human being has an instinctive understanding that there is a really big something. But by telling yourself a very sophisticated story, you can convince yourself that there is no God.
Bhagavat Maharaj, you're next. Before we move on, does anyone have a succinct point they'd like to share, or shall we just keep reading?
Let's read.
Okay. Your turn to read, Maharaj. Perry Marshall.
Perry Marshall is fascinated by the living cell's activities, and he encourages scientists to continue studying this, as if peeling off the layers of an onion. His opinion is that scientists can go on studying the cell's complex nature for any length of time, but will never fully understand it because the coding and operations are so dauntingly complex. Those who study the cell's complexity and thus form an opinion about life's origin, whether they are neo-Darwinists, intelligent design adherents, creationists, or third-way evolutionists, only study the materials that make up a physical organism. They do not study the mind and consciousness, and thus cannot explain why living beings have a sense of identity. Materialists or reductionists assume that mind, intelligence, feelings, thoughts, consciousness, and the sense of identity arise from the neural activity of the brain. Their concept can be called bottom up because they start with molecules and work upward to the formation of the first living cell, and then onward to the life forms we see today. Birds can fly, and humans cannot without an airplane. Cheetahs can run faster than humans, and hawks have better vision. Dogs have a better sense of smell, and turtles can live longer. But still, human life is cherished because of its developed power of comprehension. Just as the great cities of the world, the best automobiles, airplanes, and ships, and the timeless works of art, music, and literature began from the mind and then were manifested physically. The founders of science, including Galileo and Newton, appreciated how the order of the universe became manifested from a limitless intelligence. Intelligence is primary, and physical manifestations are secondary. This top-down understanding should be contemplated, and not simply the bottom-up understanding of those who follow Darwin. A great artist produces a masterpiece because the capability is within his mind. Millions of persons lacking this genius may produce millions of paintings, but will never produce one like Rembrandt or Van Gogh. The mind is primary and physical manifestations are secondary. Can those who adhere to the theory of abiogenesis tell us why we have a deeply felt conviction that our lives have inherent purpose and importance? When we look within ourselves, we feel that our existence is wonderful, and we possess a strong sense of value and purpose. Even the most wonderful thing can be destroyed if it is not properly maintained or if it is abused. While being interviewed by Ben Stein, the late Dr. William Praveen, former professor of history of biology at Cornell University, gave us a vivid example of what happens when one becomes convinced of Darwinian evolution. Dr. Provine or Provine, I'm not sure which way it's pronounced, said, it starts by giving us the existence of a deity, then giving up the hope that there is life after death. When you give those two up, the rest follows fairly easily. You give up the hope that there is an imminent morality, and finally, there is no human free will. If you believe in evolution, you cannot hope that there is free will. There is no hope whatsoever of there being any deep meaning in life. We live, we die, and we're gone. We're absolutely gone. Do you want me to stop there or continue?
You can just finish to the next section.
While speaking to many scientists supporting Darwinian evolution, Mr. Stein found that they more or less spoke in a similar manner, although perhaps not as bluntly as Dr. Provine. The views of the, okay, you jumped fast here. I can't see. You went too far.
Sorry.
The views of the likes of Dr. Provine are not scientifically verified truths. Rather, they are expressions of implications of their Darwinian atheistic worldview. Another prominent atheist was Nobel laureate.
Now, Rupanuga Prabhu. Any comment before we move on? Rupanuga Prabhu?
No.
Okay. Your turn. Another.
Okay. Another prominent atheist was Nobel laureate Francis Crick. In his book, The Astonishing Hypotheses, he wrote, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. If we are nothing more than complex chemical arrangements, then why would we lament when confronted with the death of a friend or relative? Nobody cries when chemicals are destroyed. If life had evolved from molecules, then there would be no objective basis for morality. Can it be proved by the laws of chemistry, physics, or biology that the killing of innocent people is wrong? Do our laws and our feelings of compassion and justice have no fundamental basis? What about our appreciation of the arts and our appreciation of beauty? We are forever searching for someone to love who will love us in return. Is this a product of some complex chemical combination? Can our physics and chemistry professors explain by their theories and equations that cheating on an exam is wrong? No, they cannot. If life can be fully understood by the laws of chemistry and physics, then why would chemistry and physics professors punish the students that cheat on their exams? It is a self-evident truth that the killing of innocent persons is immoral, just as it is a self-evident truth that our waking state is superior to our experiences in dreams. That such things are self-evident indicates that there is a metaphysical existence beyond the laws of chemistry and physics. The materialistic outlook supported by Darwin's theory has caused the erosion of all that is distinctly human, although it is a self-evident truth that humans are qualitatively distinct from animals and possess a development of consciousness that is conspicuous by its absence in animals. Ben Shapiro and David Berlinski recently discussed the philosophical concept of essentialism, which posits that humans have a suite of distinct qualities not found in animals. This view was largely rejected in the mid-20th century with the support of Darwinian theory, which supposes that all forms of life are continually evolving from the first living cell, and thus there are ultimately no distinct species. Human life is thus seen as being infinitely malleable so that it can fit any social or political agenda. David Berlinski estimates that the percentage of people willing to deny essentialism today is above 99%. So I go on?
Yes.
Okay. Dr. Jonathan G. West, who received his PhD in government and has written many books, including Darwin Day in America, How Our Politics and Culture Have Been Dehumanized in the Name of Science, gave a talk in 2020, some of which is paraphrased here. The theory of common descent, as proposed by Darwin, implies that there is no fundamental difference between human beings and other species. As Peter Singer, professor of bioethics at Princeton University, says, Darwin showed that we are simply animals. This is not an isolated view. In a 2016 survey, 45% of Americans said that they believe that there is no fundamental difference between human beings and animals. Darwin's theory has broad and significant social and moral implications. The two main pillars of Darwin's theory are the tree of life, which hypothesizes a common descent for all living beings, including humans, and natural selection or survival of the fittest. These suggest that we are not a creation of God, but an unintentional creations of a blind, impersonal process. In the words of late Harvard University paleontologist George Gaylord Simpson, man is the result of a purposeless and natural process that did not have him in mind.
Thank you, Rupanuga Prabhu. Krishna Chandra Prabhu, you're next.
Yes.
I think most will, I don't know
I'm
if
Dr.
you'll
Paul.
agree with me, but I certainly think Purnaprajna
Over the
Prabhu,
past
if you're
30
ever to
years
do an
as the
audiobook, I would.
I've helped thousands of men restore their sexual health where it counts.
Sorry.
Who is that? Oh, okay. Yes, I was going to suggest Purnaprajna Prabhu, if you're ever going to do.
Advertisement that popped up. I got
Okay.
rid of.
I just want to suggest that Krishna Chandra Prabhu, I suggest that if you ever want to make an audiobook, Purnaprajna Prabhu, just listen to Krishna Chandra's voice right now. I think you may agree that he would be the one to do an audiobook for you. Go ahead, Krishna Chandra.
Oh, thank you, Prabhu. Appreciate all your kind words. Common descent suggests that there is no fundamental difference between human beings and other species. When Peter Singer of Princeton University was interviewed by Dr. West, he claimed that the life of a newborn baby is of no more value than the life of a pig, a dog, or a chimpanzee, and that his view stems from Darwin. Jerry Coyne of the University of Chicago, one of the most prominent evolutionary biologists, favored infanticide for babies with birth defects. He wrote, "The reason we don't allow euthanasia of newborns is because human beings are seen as special. And I think this comes from religion. When religion vanishes, as it will, so will much of the opposition to both adult and newborn euthanasia." Sir David Attenborough, the respected wildlife filmmaker, said during a 2013 interview that humans are the plague of the earth. According to him, in the past, natural selection kept humans in check by killing them off. But modern society undermines natural selection by finding cures for the sick and increasing harvest to feed the masses. There is no fundamental difference between man and the higher mammals in their mental facilities. Charles Darwin. Humans are no better than bacteria. Zoologist Eric Pianka, University of Texas. The worm represents a very simple human. Geneticist Glenn Evans. In essence, we are nothing but a big fly. Geneticist Charles Zucker, Columbia University. Darwin invited humanity to face the fact nature has revealed not one scrap of evidence that humankind is superior or special. Christopher Main's Green Rage. A Darwinian looks at time-honored moral codes with deep ambivalence. Robert Wright, The Moral Animal. All that progressives ask or desire is to interpret the Constitution according to the Darwinian principle. Woodrow Wilson. Darwin's work is most important. It provides a basis in natural science for the historical class struggle. Karl Marx. At some future period, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races. Charles Darwin. We are entirely alone. There is no God, no intelligent designer, no higher purpose in our lives. Mathematician Keith Devlin, Stanford University. The Darwinian view of life has caused the erosion of the sanctity and value of human life. In the United States, during the first half of the 20th century, 60,000 women were sterilized against their will in the name of eugenics in order to remake humanity according to the principles of Darwinian evolution. And this was promoted by leading evolutionary biologists at Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Stanford, and Columbia, as well as the National Academy of Sciences. There are more gruesome examples of applications of social Darwinian theory, including genocide, all of which gave rise to forms of racism supposedly supported by science. If the misleading theory of chemical evolution is not counteracted, then all kinds of human values will continue to be undermined so that eventually they will be entirely discarded. This is the present situation happening before our very eyes.
Krishna Chandra Prabhu. Via, you're next. Do you have a thought, Via, on how 60,000 women were sterilized against their will based on their...
I think it's just,
Yes,
I think it's
go
so,
ahead.
I think it's so sad. There's like no words. I think this is the problem with godless science, which really is, it's fake science. They'll go to any extremes. They'll break, you know, all the ethics and morals in the name of science. It's crazy. And it's just so, I don't even know what to say. Like reading something like that, it's very shocking. And I mean, it's not shocking really when you look at the pharmaceutical industry and all the, you know, crimes they've been committing and have always been committing and that they're founded on. It's not surprising, but it's so sad. And it's, yeah, I don't know what to say. That's crazy.
You're speechless. You're speechless, aren't you?
Yeah. So, okay, so yes, please.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, you know, a few pages ago, they mentioned Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory. That's actually about 20 minutes from me, and that was a center for eugenics from 1910 through almost 1940. Just a trivia factoid.
Right in your neighborhood.
Right in my neighborhood. I used to walk my dogs over there many years ago.
The lady is disturbed. The lady is disturbed because in a Darwinian culture, there's no protection of women or children.
Mm-hmm.
There's no protection of anyone because that requires morality. It requires leadership with conscience.
Also, all this talk of transhumanism and genetic engineering and so many things, it is the contemporary, you know, result of all of this. Instead of accepting what God has arranged, let us make our own version, what we want to do.
It's like Satanism.
Yeah, technology is, you know, in one way it's very good. We only have this Zoom meeting because of technology. but it's just like a knife. Knife can be used to cut a sabji or to stab you. Not good or bad, it's how you use it. So the technology could be very nice. The trouble is that there's so many bad people that it's being used in a very destructive way.
Thank you. Via, would you like to continue?
Yes.
Why, when?
Why when two highly qualified scientists examine, say, the bacteria's flagellum, does one conclude that it must have been intelligently designed, while the other insists that it must have resulted from random mutations aided by natural selection? No one can observe the bacteria's flagellum being originally formed billions of years ago, and so each person interprets what it observed according to his worldview. The evidence is the same for everyone, but those having faith in a divinity see design, whereas atheists see only blind accidents. The celebrated atheist Richard Dawkins was once asked how life began. He said it was a happy chemical accident. Dr. John Lennox recently talked to Eric Metaxas, and some of what was said is paraphrased herein. John Lennox: the existence of life is bound up with the existence of genetic code. It is not just the complexity of genetic code, it is of interest, but the nature of that complexity. It has always fascinated me that the language that has been deemed appropriate to describe molecular biology at this level, taken from computer science, coded instructions in the spine of the DNA. Therefore, the evidence that comes pouring forth is that no matter how far we go with naturalistic causes, we are never going to get a solution to the question of the origin of life. It would be better to follow the evidence where it leads. If you assume that science means that you must have a naturalistic explanation, you will never get one. If you follow the evidence where it leads, then our common experience is that language always proceeds from mind. Eric how do you say that? Sorry, Metaxas. Thank you. Metaxas, thank you. The evidence obviously leads to God, although we may not be able to prove it. If we have to make a choice, then the evidence overwhelmingly points to God. John Lennox: if we go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and see a painting, the more we know about painting, the more we appreciate the genius of the artist. And the less we know about painting, the less we appreciate the artist. Similarly, the more we appreciate the complexity of living organisms, the more we appreciate the nature of the designer. Eric Metaxas: science increasingly makes the case for God. Science increasingly makes the case for God. I think that today's scientists are scared because they have a lot of cultural power, and now the evidence points away from their atheistic, naturalistic viewpoint. They are frightened, and so they make a lot of noise and insult those who debate with them. They have their narrative, and they are hostile because they feel threatened. John Lennox: the conflict is not between science and God, as atheistic scientists would have us believe. It is between science and atheism. The fine-tuning of the universe and the information content in the cell point to an intelligence and purpose. Scientism, or the idea that science can explain everything, is a constricted view of science. Real science is a search for the truth, wherever it lies. There is an old story of two men arguing. One said that a knife had cut some cloth, and the other insisted that it was a scissors. The argument continued until finally the man who argued in favor of the knife said, "Admit that you are wrong, or I will drown you in the river." The man would not relent, and so the other man threw him in the river. The drowning man, while going under, held up his hand to make one last gesture of a scissors. This is an example of the kind of obstinacy displayed in the scientists that adhere to the theory of abiogenesis, chemical evolution through it, although it has never been demonstrated.
Thank you. We're about to start chapter 2 now. Is there a comment or a question from anyone before we continue? Okay, let's see. Something here is in the chat. Okay. All right. Chapter 2. Moving along. So chapter 1 was the longest chapter, you said, Purnaprajna, Prabhu.
Yes.
So, yeah. Chapter 2, the human body is an incredibly complex machine. It is a fact that the body works mechanically. Consider the question. When you touch something hot, like a frying pan on the stove, why does your arm jerk automatically? Here's the answer, gleaned from a science textbook. Quote, a reflex action is an automatic response to a stimulus like heat or pain. Your body automatically pulls away from such dangers without you having to think about it. Suppose your hand accidentally touches a hot frying pan on the stove. This stimulates a pain receptor in the skin. Nerve impulses are sent along the sensory neuron to the spinal cord, where they are processed and sent back along the motor neuron. These nerve impulses enter the bicep in the arm, causing the muscle to contract and pull the hand away from the frying pan, unquote. If someone were to touch a hot frying pan on the stove, he or she would most likely explain the experience like this, quote, I touched the frying pan, and as soon as I felt that it was burning hot, I pulled back my arm as fast as possible, unquote. This would be a subjective understanding, but the above description of nerve impulses is much different. It describes mechanical actions and reactions rather than a personal experience, and it is a fact that while touching a hot frying pan and withdrawing one's arm, one would have no understanding of what was going on within the body. We have no idea how our food is being digested, how our blood is being energized while passing through the heart, how electrical impulses are regulating the beating of our heart, and so on. Who made this amazing machine? Did the mother and father make it? No, they were simply instrumental in the production of one's body. They know very little about how the body is designed and constructed and how it operates, and so how can they be the makers of the body? The person who designs the machine knows every detail of its construction and operation. Scientific literature regularly describes the body as a most amazing machine. Mark B. Anstendig, musician, photographer, and researcher, has written, quote, the human body is a machine consisting of many different interconnected machines. Each machine, heart, lungs, intestines, etc., runs at its own individual speed, but all function in a specific predetermined relationship to each other. In this sense, the body is analogous to the most complicated man-made machines, such as automobiles, which consist of many separately functioning components that are mechanically linked together, each of which is a complete machine. In fact, the body is the most complex of all such compound machines, unquote. Medical researcher Alton Ochsner, MD, has written, quote, we are endowed with the most perfect, the most efficient, and the best constructed machine ever devised, our body. A machine beautifully engineered and constructed with the best materials. The body's computer, the brain, is by far the most sophisticated, the finest constructed, the most efficient computer that has ever been or will ever be designed. No man-made computer can approach the efficiency of the computer each of us has. The brain's frontal lobes form an extremely elaborate electrical system which monitors and operates the entire machine with an efficiency that unknown in any other machine. The brain is the center for the activation of the muscles that move our body, and it monitors the various activities which are essential for the body to properly function, namely the pumping system, the waste disposal system, the heart regulating system, and so on. Quote, the thermostat located in the brain is adjusted to such a fine degree that the temperature remains constant unless something interferes with the function of the machine. If the body generates more heat, the thermostat goes to work and opens avenues for the dissipation of the heat, such as dilation of the vessels on the surface of the body and outpouring of fluid on the surface to permit evaporation, which tends to lower the surface temperature. The pumping system of the body is the most efficient of all pumping systems. It begins working while the infant is still in the mother's womb, and it pumps day and night without cessation until the individual dies. With no rest, it is obvious that this machine is a very efficient one. It requires a great deal of energy, much more than is ordinarily thought. The heart requires no conscious action on our part to function. Purnaprajna, Prabhu.
1 minute. Okay. A great deal of energy is required by the body. Contraction of muscles, including the heart, as for every motor, requires energy. In all these activities, a great deal of oxygen is required to permit the combustion of the fuel utilized. Oxygen enters the body through the respiratory tract, the nose, mouth, trachea, and lungs. It's absorbed in the lungs by hemoglobin in the red blood cells and is delivered to all the cells of the body. In the cells, oxygen is exchanged for the carbon dioxide, which is the waste product of the cell, resulting from the energy generated within the cell. The carbon dioxide, in turn, is transported by the blood back to the lungs, where it is given up and discharged from the body in the exhaled air. In this way, the marvelous transport system of carrying oxygen to the tissues for their vital uses and the transportation of the noxious carbon dioxide back to the lungs to be exhaled is almost an automatic process. The human body is supplied with energy by the food that is taken in and is consumed more efficiently than in other machines. The food is masticated, swallowed, and acted upon by digestive juices in the stomach and in the intestines. As a result of chemical alterations, it is absorbed into the bloodstreams and carried to the liver. Because toxic products and bacteria are absorbed into the blood, they must be removed, which is done very efficiently by the liver. After the food substances have been purified by the liver, they are carried by the veins back to the heart and lungs to be transported throughout the body where they can be utilized. Next person.
Let's see. Next person in the group here. Let me look down the line. Oh, it's Rupanuga Prabhu's turn.
Oh, okay. The human body is a most efficient chemical factory. It can produce chemicals of very complex nature, which are required for body functions by using the raw chemicals and building them into complex chemical structures, which are needed for the proper functioning of the machine. This is done in various portions of the body, in the liver, the glands of internal secretion, the pituitary, and the adrenal, the prostate, the thyroid, and the pancreas. Another part of the waste disposal plant is disposal of waste through the gastrointestinal tract. After the food has been utilized and most of the essential elements have been extracted from it, including the water in order to conserve water, the residue is excreted from the lower intestinal tract. A very important part of the disposal system is the action of bacteria on waste products, which is necessary, particularly in the large intestine or colon, to make a normal function of the intestinal process. The bacteria helps in the chemical breakdown of the food elements that the body needs. The cells of the body are continually being destroyed as a wearing out process, but are being regenerated. It is obvious that the human body is the most efficient and best designed system that has ever been designed. But like all systems, it is subject to wear. The human body is made of cells. When groups of cells do the same kind of work, they are called tissues. When groups of tissues work together, they are called organs. Some examples of organs are the heart, lungs, skin, and stomach. When organs work together, they are called systems. For example, the heart, lungs, blood, and blood vessels work together and make up the circulatory system. A typical high school textbook explains there are 11 systems in the human body: muscular system, respiratory system, digestive system, intergumentary system, to skin, skeletal system, circulatory or cardiovascular system, excretory or urinary system, reproductive system, nervous system, lymphatic system, and endocrine system. Each system has a special job. All the body systems must work together to keep the body healthy. The bones and muscles work together to support and move the body. The respiratory system takes in oxygen from the air and it gets rid of carbon dioxide. The digestive system absorbs water and nutrients from the food one eats. The circulatory system carries oxygen, water, and nutrients to the cells through the body. Waste from the cells are eliminated by the respiratory system, the excretory system, and the skin. The nervous system controls all these activities with electrical impulses. Here is an example of how various parts of the body work in coordination to perform a particular task. This is what Dr. Sava Nicole has written about the eye, optic nerve, and brain. The eye works like a camera. The iris and the pupil control how much light is let into the back of the eye, much like the shutter of a camera. When it is very dark, our pupils get bigger, letting in more light. When it is very bright, our irises constrict, letting in very little light. The lens of the eye, like the lens of a camera, helps us to focus. The focus light rays are then directed to the back of the eye onto the retina, which acts like the film in a camera. The cells in the retina absorb and convert the light to electrochemical impulses, which are transferred along the optic nerve to the brain. The brain is instrumental in helping us to see as it translates the image into something we can understand. Our eyes and brain are made from the same type of tissue. Our sensitive eyes react to even the least possible chemical changes in the brain, including those that arise because of certain emotional or mental conditions. The brain's control over the eye is so big that it even gives the sense of the picture that the same eye could not see. For example, physicists tell us that although we normally see objects that we observe, they are turned upside down on our lens and retina. The eyes do not possess the function to turn the picture into what we see as normal. The brain is the one who needs to process the visual information to create order out of what is perceived. When I think, where am I in all this? Where am I located?
I'm lost.
It's all going on automatically. So machines have forms that are never found in nature. And that is why they must be consciously manufactured by intelligent persons. And machines are never made solely from the materials naturally found in nature, such as stone, wood, earth, and sand. Machines are made of steel, plastic, and other materials made by the conscious endeavor of intelligent persons. Even when the components are assembled, it takes deliberate action to put them together to produce a machine that performs the required function. Think of even the simplest of machines, such as a bicycle. We know that a bicycle could never be randomly formed simply by the laws of physics. Once the bicycle is assembled, it will act according to the laws of physics, but it will only act if supplied energy from the outside, the cyclist. All machines require the input of energy, such as gas or electricity. Machines operate according to physical and chemical laws, but they must be assembled and acted upon by persons. When a cyclist pushes down the bicycle's pedal, it moves according to physical laws. But the act of the cyclist involves his conscious decision to pedal the bicycle, which is quite distinct because that decision cannot be described by physical laws. As in a machine, the parts of an organism, such as the heart, blood, nerves, muscles, and so on, have functional relationships with each other. And so this arrangement must have been consciously made and is not simply the result of chemical and physical laws. Since there are no mathematical, physical, or chemical explanations of how these interacting systems came to be in the human body, or even in a single cell organism, we must conclude that this was intelligently designed and assembled. As someone designs a large machine so that the operator can get results with minimal manipulation of the controls, so by some higher arrangement, the self can control the body and mind by an extremely subtle process.
Krishna,
Someone else?
who would you like to read next? Krishna Chandra?
Oh, I'm sorry, Prabhu. I didn't hear you. 1 second. Okay. Where am I starting from, Prabhu?
Each cell of the body. Each cell of the body is a wonderful machine.
Oh, thank you kindly. Each cell of the body is a wonderful machine, and the body is composed of trillions of cells. As research progresses, the inconceivable complexity of the cell becomes more and more apparent. Take, for example, this news release of July 10th, 2015. Researchers at EMBL, European Molecular Biology Laboratory, Heidelberg, have produced detailed images of the protein coats that surround trafficking vesicles, the transport pods that move material around within biological cells. The study produced today in Science provides a new understanding of the complex machines that make up the cell's logistic network. Vesicles are responsible for transporting molecules between the different compartments within a cell and for bringing material into cells from outside. There are several types of vesicle. Each has a specific type of coat which is made up of different proteins and assemble onto a membrane surrounding the vesicle. The EMBL team has been taking a close look. I apologize. The EMBL team has been taking a close look coat called COPL. Apologize. This surrounds vesicles that move material around with the Golgi apparatus and to the endoplasmic reticulum, ER. These are regions of the cell where proteins are made and modified in preparation for transport to the cell surface. From an article on the University of Sao Paulo website entitled "The Complexity of the Cell." The cell is the most complex and most elegantly designed system man has ever witnessed. Professor of Biology Michael Denton, in his book, Evolution, A Theory in Crisis, explains the complexity with an example To grasp the reality of life as it has been revealed by molecular biology, we must magnify the cell 1,000 million times until it is 20 kilometers in diameter and resembles a giant structure large enough to cover a great city like London or New York. What we would then see would be an object of unparalleled complexity and adaptive design. On the surface of the cell, we would see millions of openings, opening and closing to allow a continual stream of materials to flow in and out. If we were to enter one of these openings, we would find ourselves in a world of supreme technology and bewildering complexity, a complexity beyond our creative capacities, a reality which is the very antithesis of chance, which excels in every sense anything produced by the intelligence of man. John Leif, MD, writes in an article entitled Amazing Complexity of Cellular Membranes, dated September 28, 2014. When seeking the origin of cellular life, most scientists first try to create a spontaneous fatty membrane that could theoretically surround a cell. In fact, real cellular membranes are anything but spontaneous and simple. Membranes are made of extremely complex lipids, of which there are many different versions, each with different mechanical and functional properties. Very complex manufacturing centers build these many different lipids, transport them, and signal constantly between compartments for quality control. Each of the thousands of different lipids has different chemical and structural characteristics used for specific functions.
Thank you. Via, are you there to read? Via? Are you unmuted? Via?
Sorry, Hare Krishna Prabhu. So from reading about the astonishing, that's from there.
Yes. And then
Okay.
after that is a prairie. And then Anne, if she's available to read.
Okay. Reading about the astonishing complexity of the cell gives us some perspective. Take the Miller-Urey experiment that produced some amino acid, and then consider the gigantic gap between that and the creation of a single cell. Then contemplate the gap between the creation of a single cell and the organizing of trillions of cells to form a human body consisting of systems of organs working together in perfect harmony. Was the forming of some amino acid in a laboratory indicative that life had evolved from a random interaction of molecules? When it cannot be imagined how molecules could have randomly formed the first living cell, just think of how much more difficult it would be to imagine how the first cells could have randomly formed a human body with trillions of cells working together to form a brain, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, genitals, stomach, and so on. We are endowed with free will, and so we can place our faith in a worldview that satisfies our inner yearning for the truth. Did life randomly evolve from chemicals, or by a subtle and intelligent control over nature that our eyes, even with the help of the best microscopes and telescopes, cannot see? Less intelligent people say, seeing is believing. Suppose something traveled to a foreign country, and while there saw that everything was ingeniously organized and meticulously maintained, although not able to see the administrator of that place, that person would naturally surmise that someone was doing an excellent job. We generally take things for granted, but it is the fact that the workings of the human body are so complex and perfectly arranged that many people spend their entire mature lives studying it. It is astonishing to consider that the body began with the combination of a tiny sperm and ova, which contained all the information required for the formation of the body's features. It is astonishing to contemplate how a tiny seed contains all the information required for the development of a massive tree, and how the information of such wonderful varieties, producing apple trees, mango trees, avocado trees, and innumerable others. The building blocks of living organisms, such as amino acids, do not contain the information needed to construct a cell, to construct an organ, such as a heart, or to construct an entire human body. The building materials of a skyscraper do not contain the information needed to construct the building. Someone must consciously manipulate the building materials to make the desired structure. Similarly, it appears that there is a universal consciousness and intelligence manipulating the molecules that make up the bodies of all living beings. The human body is not simply a lump of random combined molecules. It has incomparable design, which is encoded in the tiny genes. The head, arms, torso, the legs are so arranged that, at least in youth, they appear very beautiful, a beauty that is universally appreciated. The body is not a random arrangement of parts without aesthetic sense. The human body is commonly described as an organic machine, and yet no one likes to be thought of as a machine. Intuitively, everyone knows that they are a person and not simply a complex or organic machine. People rightly feel offended when their personality is ignored while being judged simply on the basis of their physical body. We all know that we are people, and yet the concept of person is beyond the confines of physics and chemistry. Although physicists such as the late Stephen Hawking hope to discover a theory of everything, it must be understood that chemistry and physics have their domains. Prabhu, can you go up a little bit? Thank you. Have their domains, their limitations, and do not describe the totality of existence or of life. Chapter 3, do I go on?
Why not Prairie to continue?
Okay, yes.
Prairie, are you ready to read?
Yes. Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Very much for coming.
Thank you. Chapter 3. There is more to life than what meets the eye. Intuitively, if we look at a drawing of a supposed primordial pond of simple molecules and are told that this is our origin, it doesn't have the ring of truth. While looking at the people around us, if we think of how their bodies are made of trillions of cells and how these cells form the body's organs and systems, all perfectly working in coordination, and how all these systems appear to be working automatically without anyone's supervision, and how these people are absorbed in thinking about something or other, perhaps even forgetful of their bodies, it is astonishing. We always know what's going on in our mind, and we are generally conscious of our appearance, but we know very little of what is going on inside our bodies. Modern society considers itself to be advanced in scientific knowledge. We certainly have made wonderful progress in technology, but at the same time, we are perplexed by the innumerable horrible conditions human beings face throughout the world, often caused by inflicting pain upon one another. Although we have learned to use computers, the internet, wireless communication, and airplanes, that takes us anywhere in the world within a day, it could be that we have not understood the nature of life and the importance of human life. Why are there wars, ethnic tensions, violent crimes, and heartless exploitation? Why does a dog snarl when another dog comes into its territory? That is its nature. The dog doesn't have a reason. Why are people fighting over nature's resources? Why are people envious of one another? Why are ethnic groups envious of one another? Why are nations envious of one another? Why are we never satisfied so that we want more and more and more? That is our acquired animal nature, amplified by our advanced human intelligence. They say that man is rational, the rational animal, but the misuse of the rationality has made the human animal more dangerous than tigers and alligators. We have made great advancements in chemistry, physics, mathematics, and biology, but at the same time, we may be ignorant about the nature of life. There is obviously more to life than a mere combination of molecules. Even prominent scientists admit that the understanding of life eludes them. Dr. James Tour, it is used to be said that our molecules change every 7 years. That's a bunch of nonsense. They change continuously. Every molecule is constantly undergoing a proton exchange. We are dynamic structures constantly changing. What is the real me? I don't know what the real me is. If you want to say that the matter is the real me, then you have a big problem because it is constantly changing. James D. Watson, co-discoverer of the DNA structure, wrote in his book, Molecular Biology of the Gene, we must immediately admit that the structure of the cell will never be understood in the same way as that of water or glucose molecules. Not only will the exact structure of most macromolecules within the cell remain unsolved, but their relative locations within cells can only be vaguely known. It is thus not surprising that many chemists, after brief periods of enthusiasm for studying life, silently return to the world of pure chemistry. In Chapter 1, the theory of abiogenesis was discussed and rejected, not only because of a total lack of evidence, but because it is obstinately refuses to acknowledge the astonishing intelligence behind the wonderful complexities found in living organisms, and it reduces human beings to entities just a small step above the apes. Darwin's theory has been studied for a century and a half and has been propagated throughout the world, but now it is time to move on. This chapter will present another understanding of life that will not neglect the more developed capabilities that our human consciousness affords us, and will also give us a glimpse of human life's sublime purpose. Let us begin with self-evident truths. We positively know that we exist because we are sentient beings, as opposed to dull matter, which is not aware of its existence. We know that we are persons and not machines, and we know that our lives have purpose and importance. We intuitively understand the distinction between good and evil, and we can inquire about the nature of ourselves and our environment, an inquiry conspicuous by its absence in other life forms.
Conspicuous.
Oh, yes, sorry, Prabhu. An inquiry conspicuous by its absence in other life forms. Shall I continue?
Finish that sentence.
Yes. We observe that our bodies are constantly changing from infancy to old age and ultimately death.
Dvija Garanga, are you available to read? And then after that is Anne, and then Ananda Dev, if any of you are available after Dvija Garanga.
If my microphone is working, okay.
Sounds great.
Good.
Consciousness or awareness.
I'm not seeing where that is.
Top of the page. Consciousness
Oh
or
yeah, there it is. Okay, sorry, I got it. Consciousness or awareness is our prime characteristic, for without consciousness, we would be no better than robots. Spurred on by the neo-Darwinian view that consciousness and our sense of identity are products of the interactions of the neurons of the brain, there are many who believe that a machine with complex circuitry could someday become conscious. This is pure fantasy and has no scientific basis. Our technology has become so advanced that robots are manufactured that closely resemble human beings. Even when you touch them, the skin feels real and warm. By use of artificial intelligence, the robot will sense the weather and say, "What a beautiful day," with its computer-generated voice. What would be the difference between such a robot and a living human being? A robot might have a device to sense the nature of one's, or a robot might have a device to sense the nature of one's conversation, and it might be programmed to give appropriate responses. But would it possess consciousness of itself and its environment like us? Could the robot wonder, why is that person talking to me like this? Or would it simply give programmed responses? By some mechanism, it might be able to sense that it is a hot day, but would it feel hot? If you gently stroked the robot, it might be programmed to make sounds like ooh and ah, but would it feel pleasure? Truthfully, the answer is no. Every day, we use cars, computers, toasters, refrigerators, tables, chairs, and beds. These are all made of the elements, and yet the laws of chemistry and physics cannot explain why these came into existence. These things originated in the minds of men and were then assembled by people or computer-programmed machines, and did not come together randomly or by chance. It took some knowledge of chemistry and physics to make the many things that we use, such as airplanes and glue. But without the persons designing and assembling them, they would never have come into existence. Keep going.
To the bottom of the page.
Yeah, it's coming close to when I won't be able to read it. Thank you. Dr. John Lennox gives a nice example of how there are different kinds of explanations. Suppose someone sees water boiling on the stove and asks, why is the water boiling? A scientist might say, because of the heat from the stove, the water molecules have become very agitated. But the person boiling the water might say, the water's boiling because I want a cup of coffee. These are two kinds of explanation, and they don't contradict each other, they are complementary. One gives an answer that tells us what is happening with the water, and the other gives an answer that explains why the water came to be on the stove. If we want to understand life and life's origin, we must not limit ourselves to the explanations offered by the physical sciences. Consciousness, or the power of observation, is not static. Our appreciation of our existence and our environment grows with the development of our bodies. When we were babies, we were conscious, but our consciousness was not developed. Animals are also conscious, but like small children, their consciousness is not developed. No one objects when a 1-year-old breaks something because it is understood that the child's understanding has not yet been developed. Similarly, if an animal in the jungle kills another innocent animal, no one blames it. A male dog may aggressively try to rape a female dog, but no one considers this to be immoral. Humans with developed consciousness appreciate great works of art, whereas a dog might urinate on a Rembrandt painting if it were placed on the ground. A human being can appreciate great literature, whereas an animal might tear a book to shreds. Animals possess undeveloped consciousness, whereas human beings possess developed consciousness that allows them to question and understand the nature of their existence. Along with developed consciousness comes the intelligence to discriminate between what should be done and what should not be done. Those with more developed consciousness can see that persons with less developed consciousness lack such discrimination and thus engage in horrible acts. The human being's developed consciousness also brings with it a sense of responsibility. Animals behave according to their acquired natures, but a human being can regulate his activities and even restrain himself so that he acts according to society's laws and standards or according to religious principles.
Thank you. Anne, are you able to read? If not, then Ananda Dev. Are you able to read? Ananda Dave?
All right.
Okay.
Haribol.
In India and other countries? Haribol.
Haribol.
And then Sikarani after you.
Okay.
In India and other countries, fruits and vegetables are sold by the side of the road. If a cow comes and takes something from a vegetable stand while the proprietor is inattentive, when the seller sees this, he will shout and wave a stick so that the cow moves on. But if a human being comes and takes something without paying, the vegetable seller might call the police. A human being who doesn't accept the responsibility of proper behavior can certainly be called a two-legged animal. The scientists studying the origin of life assume that the physical organism, the body, is life. And thus they also assume that the mind, intelligence, ego, identity, and consciousness are products of the brain. But there is another understanding that predates Western recorded history and which informs us that life did not evolve from dull matter, but is distinct from matter and is eternal. The ancient Sanskrit text Bhagavad Gita has been studied by the greatest thinkers for as long as there has been recorded history, and it is studied in all the major universities today. The Bhagavad Gita begins by logically explaining how a person is different from the physical body. As the embodied self or soul continually passes from childhood to youth and then to old age, after the death of the body, the self attains another body. One who is self-realized is not disturbed by such a change. Generally, people talk about reincarnation, but a more precise term is transmigration. The term reincarnation indicates that we had previous lives and will have future lives. That's all right, but transmigration is the understanding that we are changing bodies at every moment. And this is confirmed both by observation and by the findings of molecular biologists. Since our bodies are constantly changing while we remain the same person, it is natural to accept that we will continue to exist after the death of the body, and that we existed before being injected into the womb of our mother so that we could develop our present body. All religions teach us to strive for eternal life, and the majority of people identify with some kind of religion. When these people are asked, do you think that you will continue to exist after the death of your body, or will you cease to exist? Many will say, I will continue to exist. I will go to heaven. Then when they are asked, the body will be burnt or buried in the ground, and so what is it that will go to heaven? They generally pause and then say, my soul or my spirit. Such persons first say, I will continue to exist, and then say, my soul or spirit will go to heaven. There is a distinction between a person and that which is possessed by that person. According to Bhagavad Gita, the person is the soul of the body. It is not that the person is the body and that the body possesses a soul. The person is embodied, or as the Bhagavad Gita states, the person is seated on a machine made of the material energy. When we look in a mirror, we naturally consider the body that we see to be our reflected self. And yet the simple truth is that the body is not the self, and this can be proven logically. Even a child can understand that the self is distinct from the body. If two questions are carefully considered, then the simple truth that the physical body is not the self can be clearly understood. Were you present in your childhood body? You remember playing with your friends? Yes, you were present in the childhood activities you remember. Some may doubt that they are the same person that had played as a child many years before. After all, we appear to change in so many ways. To such a person, it can be said, I hope that you will live for many more years. If after many years the time of death arrives, will it be you that experiences this or someone else? The answer must be yes, it will be me. Everyone knows that they will have to face death at some time in the future. Who would dare say, I will not have to experience death? Thus, it is a fact that the self continues while the body continually changes from childhood to youth and then to old age.
Thank you. Shikarani, you'll be the last to read. You're the only one that didn't read besides Anne, but she doesn't read usually.
Okay,
The
sure.
second question is,
The second question is, was the body you know now present in your childhood? Or is this a different body? Every biologist knows that the body is constantly changing. Here is what a scientist said as reported in an article in Time magazine. About 98% of the atoms in the human body are renewed each year. This surprising fact is discussed by Dr. Paul Evershold of Oak Ridge in the latest annual report of the Institution, Smithsonian Institution. Dr. Ebersole based his conclusion on experiments with radioisotopes, radioisotopes, which trace the movement of chemical elements in and out of the body. The fastest changing component, says Dr. Ebersole, is water. It forms about 70% of the body, and about half of the water molecules are replaced every 8 days. Other fleeting elements are carbon, sodium, and potassium. The calcium and phosphorus in bones and teeth stay put longer, but even they are not permanent. Bones are quite dynamic, says Dr. Ebersole. The little crystals in bones are continually dissolving and reforming. In the process, some of the atoms are lost. Some of the brain tissues, though soft and juicy, are more permanent than bone. One of the most important elements is iron. The same iron atoms stay in a body a long time. Dr. Ebersole believes that 2% of the body substance is an ample allowance for the part that sticks around for as long as a year. A human body, he says, shouldn't be considered permanent in a material sense. It is more like a famous old regiment, all of whose members have changed many times over, while the regiment retains its organizational identity. Look at a photo of an adult and then look at the photo of the person as a small child. The two bodies look completely different. Generally, people say that the body has grown, but it is more accurate to say that the body has changed. Of course, the grown up body is the same as child's body in the sense that it is the body that was conceived within the womb of the mother. Just see how nature presents such a wonderful illusion. We accept our current body as being the same as our childhood body, but in truth, and our body is constantly changing. Although the body is constantly changing, the embodied person remains the same. Ask any mother whether her grown up son or daughter is the same person whose diaper she had changed as a baby. The answer will be a unanimous yes. Imagine that someone had a very dear childhood friend whose family had moved away, and suppose that the person met him or her many years later. It is a fact that despite the changes in their bodies, they would accept each other as the very same person they had known as children. Although someone's body has changed, the person's mother, friends, and everyone else considers him or her to be the same person they had known perhaps many, many years ago. Do you want to continue?
If someone's, yeah, finish the page.
If someone signs a contract, he must honor it many years later. Despite the changes of the body, one can't violate a contract by arguing that he is now a different person from the one who had signed it. Suppose someone took a loan from a bank. After many years, can that person argue that because his body has completely changed, he's a different person and thus did not take the loan and so doesn't need to repay it? When a boy and a girl are married, they are asked to make a vow that they will stay together until death. They are asked, until death do you thou part. After many years, when the body has radically changed, can a person claim that it was someone else who got married? Suppose someone failed his high school many years ago. Could he say, I did not fail, that was someone else? The simple truth which everyone practically experiences throughout their lives is that they remain the same person despite continuous changes of bodies. A friend once told me this little story. There was a woman whose husband had just died. The family members were gathered and preparations for the funeral were in progress. Someone requested the wife, stay here with your husband until it is time to take the body for cremation. The wife adamantly refused, saying that she could not bear to stay with the dead body. At this time, someone remarked, for so many years you slept next to this body and you held it, kissed it, and loved it with all your heart. How is that you are now repulsed by the same body?
Thank you very much, Sikarani. That leaves us 3 more pages to finish next session. And I have 2 questions for Purnaprajna and Rupanuga Prabhus, if I may ask. Is it okay if we leave the other 3 pages for the next session?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah, so my 2 questions are Sadaputa Prabhu and Dritakarma Prabhu. I believe both of them helped to produce the Origins magazine. I don't know who's calling right now. I hope it's not me. Anyway, it'll die down. I can't see if someone's calling me. So yes, okay, I want to focus here on Origins magazine. I've heard in the past that the Origins magazine, that because the scientists' speculations are constantly changing, are pretty much all the arguments presented in Origins magazine. Is that still kind of the cutting edge, or have new theories been developed since that time, and is some of the Origins relevant, or all of it is relevant? I just wanted to know your views on that, please.
Well, I haven't seen the Origins magazine for many, many years. I don't know if it's still in print or not, but at the time it was popular. Devotees were distributing it on Sankirtan, and people were appreciating it very much. But I wanted to make an observation, if I might. Can I do that?
Yes.
Okay. I was just looking at a definition of science in the Random House Webster's College Dictionary.
Yeah.
And it says clearly, a method of research in which a problem is identified, relevant data are gathered, a hypothesis is formulated, and the hypothesis is empirically tested. And this was originated in 1850 to 1855.
Wow.
Now, this sounds like about the time of Darwin's theory, which means he was not fully understanding of the definition of science, because his hypothesis was never demonstrated by him or anyone else. In fact, it's still called a theory and not a law. And the word science actually comes from the Latin root scire, according to this dictionary. And scire means to know. It doesn't mean it may be, or perhaps, or in the future. It means to know something. In other words, a theory has to be demonstrated in order to be science. And a scientist is described in the dictionary as an expert in this method. So I'm thinking that the intellectual atmosphere of the time was not so advanced. They didn't have the kind of microscopes they have now. They didn't have the telescopes they have now. for them to see something 1,000 times magnified or 125,000 times magnified? Had they had access to the human cell that they could see magnified a couple 100,000 times, I don't think Darwin's theory would have gotten off the ground. But he got away with it because it was also the origin of a time when persons were beginning to recognize the scientific method. And that's not what he followed. They don't follow it today. The Darwinists still don't follow it. They still have not demonstrated their theory. So, and by definition, they're not really scientists. By definition, they don't follow the methodology of science. But because technology and communications have increased in such a way, and through education, through books, and through television, radio, and the computer, it's broadcast as the truth.
Right.
But it's not the truth. The truth must be demonstrated. There must be facts. There must be.
I'd be curious to hear what kind of term would you use for someone like Darwin, not scientist. What would you call him?
Speculator.
Pseudoscience.
He's a speculator. He's speculating on his imagination that he sees that there are various different kinds of life, some more complex than others. He concludes that they evolved from each other.
Right.
Because he sees that there are some forms of life are more advanced than others. So he speculates that they must have grown from previous forms.
Right.
But that's childlike. That's just childish imagination. There's no demonstration.
Would that be what Prabhupada would call the fertile brain?
Actually, Sri Prabhupada explains evolution. There is evolution, but it's not the evolution that he's describing. There's an evolution in the universe, beginning, as we said earlier, we were talking about sound. And when sound is, when the mode of ignorance is combined with sound, the mode of ignorance with sound, you've got material knowledge. So it all comes from the sound. And we're talking now about the sound coming from Bhagavad Gita, which completely contradicts Darwin's speculations.
I would like to make a comment.
It's your book.
That these, microbiologists, synthetic chemists, they are scientists and they do practice science in the sense that they have understood the chromosome, the DNA, the nucleotides, the this, that, there. But when they try to talk about the origin of life, that's not science. That's just wishful thinking or speculation or whatever you want to call it.
But
So the whole thing of the idea that life evolved from matter, that's not science.
So what drives that speculative nature? Why do they do that?
Atheism.
And
If there's no God, then the only possibility is that things just happen by natural law or by chance or whatever.
But at the same time, the drive to need to know, it's like, even if it's denial of theistic idea, but there's still, if they didn't have a drive to know, they wouldn't even come up with their speculations. They wouldn't need to unless they're trying to cover the truth.
The drive for sense gratification is greater than the drive for knowledge.
Nice.
That's the problem.
Nice.
That's the problem. Henry Huxley, the father of Aldous Huxley, who was a contemporary of Darwin, championed his theories very widely. And in one letter I saw, he wrote that he said he liked Darwin's theory because it placed no limits on his behavior. And that is one of the reasons why it's so popular, because it fits right in with a paradigm covering the world that we exist simply to enjoy our senses.
So
no regular principles.
Yeah, there's no accountability. Interesting.
You say Purnaprajna, Prabhu?
Pardon?
What did you say, Prabhu?
Oh, I was saying that in Darwin's view, there's no regulative principles.
Mhm.
No, there's no absolute. There's no absolute. There's nothing, no standard to compare behavior with. Whatever behavior is there is good because it evolved naturally through natural selection. Therefore, it must be good. You see? So they fool people by saying science has given you so much labor-saving device. It's true, we really couldn't do well without the washing machine. But that doesn't mean that they can be philosophers of life, that they can be knowledgeable beyond their expertise.
They're more like technologists than
Yes.
at best. Their application is some practical,
Yes.
mundane affair.
Applied science has made gigantic steps. As Shobhab said that the electronic age will be very advanced, much more advanced. And it's so advanced. But what are they doing? They're not using it properly. For example, our body's running on electricity. The brain waves, the nerve impulses, the contraction, the expansion of the heart is all done by electrical impulses. So modern science has figured out how to detect these impulses and to duplicate them, so that in order to control people. So what is good at that? What's good about that? Like Srila Prabhupada said, they're really good at inventing things to end life, and everyone has to die anyway, but they're very good at producing bombs that kill us sooner than later. So what is the credit? Even if they could duplicate one cell, there's trillions of cells in our bodies. What's the credit? And if they could produce a child in a test tube in their laboratory, what's the credit? There are already 5 or 6, 7, 8 billion grown babies on the planet. If they could produce one seed, if you were to give them an apple seed and break down the constituent parts into various tubes or vials, and then ask them to put it back together again, they couldn't do it. Could they plant a seed that would grow that they created? No. So what credit? It's all a question of grants. It's all a question of propaganda. It's all a question of education, you see? So our task is to defeat this materialism, the arch enemy of Vaishnavism. Our task as Prabhupada's disciples is to be outwardly preaching against this, because it's the underlying cause of all this misbehavior today. And now what's happening is we're getting the karmic results on a global scale. And even the scientists themselves are the delivery systems for the karma, for the killing fields all around the world.
Okay. She got up, but then I think she went to sleep. I'm talking to somebody.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. As we were reading through Purnaprajna Prabhu's book, and I was reading the various remarks of the geneticists, I was horrified. They're comparing human life. I mean, we understand the Atma is in every living being, so therefore all life is sacred. But they were saying we're no more than a fly or a worm. And I'm thinking, wow, if you're thinking that way, then no matter Klaus Schwab could say in his Great Reset book, we need to cut the population down to 500 million to rid the planet of, we need to depopulate. This is all eugenics. And am I correct in saying that Charles Darwin is the father of modern eugenics, which inspired Hitler and so forth? Am I correct?
Yes, many people have pointed that out.
Racial cleansing, it's that would be a geneticist idea, isn't it? Racial cleansing.
Yeah.
Ridding the planet of those who are considered inferior. It can be rational.
They've been ridding the planet of many cows, and many
Yes,
bulls,
yes.
many chickens, and many hogs. They've been releasing them on the basis of their being inferior,
Mhm.
and that's what they're paying for. They're paying because man's supreme dominion over man's supreme dominion over all that be doesn't mean he has a right to exploit everything. But that's what they've been doing.
We are the stewards, we're the caretakers, not the butchers.
Yes.
I give the example that I live in the Dominion of Canada. I remember as a young boy, we had a map on the wall here in Canada, the Dominion of Canada. But that doesn't mean the Prime Minister has the right to butcher all his citizens because he has dominion.
Yeah, but he has the right to take away all their work because he's a demon.
That's right.
People have a right to work. Krishna says, I'm the ability in man. That
Yes.
ability is given by God, and they have the right to use it. Even if they're atheists, they have a right to work. But he's taking away that. He's taking away by these limitations, you see. But that's demonic. The leader is supposed to protect the people and make sure they all have work. That's basic. So Srila Prabhupada he called the political efforts at one time in his movement, the God We Trust Party for purified leaders.
Mm.
And that's the problem. Purified leaders in every field. He said, I want our men to go into every field and purify it by their existence. So it's a question of purification. And that's going on by the laws of nature. And it's going on by Srila Prabhupada's books and Harinam and our best preaching. There's no other way to purify the situation or to deal with it. The transcendental sound is required. Srila Prabhupada said that when you go out in Harinam and you chant at a big festival or something, the chanting goes around the planet eternally. And when someone has a big rock concert, it goes around the planet 7 times only. So we have to continuously chant the holy name in our homes and on the streets, everywhere we can, in order to purify the atmosphere, because that's what the golden age means. We have to help usher that in. It's already 535 years old.
I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. I don't know if Purnaprajna Prabhu will be coming back, but this evening I decided to expand the audience and I started contacting several Facebook groups based on Darwinism and based on evolutionary theory. And I put up the post and I put up a picture of Purnaprajna Prabhu's book cover, Life Beyond Darwin, and a little bit of a write-up on it, a critique of Abiogenesis. And it was interesting because one group immediately deleted it. They would not even allow it. And then another group, and this is what, they asked me at first, I have to become a member of the group. And I just wanted to point this out to everybody. This group is called The Evolution of Humans, a private group of 5,400 people. And they say, keep to what's in scope if you want to join this group. We're here to share science. Posts should address the field of human evolution. We cover both genetic and cultural aspects of human evolution. The evolution of human cultures is within our scope, but only up to the development of metalworking, the invention of writing, and the rise of kingdoms. This varies across the world, but is roughly before 3000 BCE. Personal responses to Paleolithic artwork are welcome. Reviews of works depicting evolution in art form are welcome. Now listen to what they say here in number 6. Keep away from what's out of scope. This group is not for discussing pseudoscientific or religious objections to evolution. This group is not a fan site for modern media's use of the caveman image, eugenics, and the future engineering of the human body are out of scope. But I mean, how can you separate eugenics when isn't that where Darwinism ultimately leads to? How can you separate one from the other? I'm asking. They've created parameters where they don't even give the opportunity to discuss metaphysical.
They want an echo chamber.
Uh-huh. Right. Is there any comment or question from anyone else before we call it an evening? Prairie, you have Krishna Chandra, you had something?
Oh, I had a question. Are we gonna have a meeting on Friday, or is that canceled?
Yes, why not?
Oh, I thought it was Gora Purnima on Friday.
Tomorrow. That's tomorrow.
Oh my. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. My calendars are conflicted.
That depends on who you follow. I mean, if you follow Srila Prabhupada in the Mayapur calendar, it's on Friday.
So on
If you
Friday?
follow, yeah, and it's also Purnima, which is a full moon, which is when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared on Gaur Purnima. So Purnima is tomorrow. I'm sorry, Friday. It's Friday. So anyway, it depends. Srila Prabhupada says that the full moon, he said, just like he said, Ekadasi is the 11th day of the new moon and the 11th day of the full moon. So in those days, we can do it according to what the moon's phase is, where we are. But the rest of the they all happened in India anyway, and all during Srila Prabhupada's time, and for 12 years after Srila Prabhupada disappeared, we all followed the Mayapur calendar up until 1989.
I see. And then we started making it locally.
That became computerized in India.
Uh-huh. So do you think we should read this Friday, or should we just focus on Lord Chaitanya on Friday?
I have no opinion on that. I like to finish up.
Yeah, me too. I don't think Lord Chaitanya will mind if we get more ammunition to defeat the
Can we do both somehow?
Well, we only have 3 pages left, but yeah, there's more to say. I wanted to make Rupanuga Prabhu and Purnaprajna aware of the work of Akandadi, who are working on defeating atheistic science, as well as our godbrother Hari Krishna Prabhu in Amsterdam. They both put out books. So I just wanted to show some links for that on Friday. Prairie, do you have any comments or questions about tonight?
I just wanted to mention that I won't be able to attend on Friday as I'll be going to a program.
Okay.
But I appreciate it, and I appreciate the nectar from Rupanagadas as always. Thank you so much.
It'll be recorded so you can see it later.
Thank you.
Shikarani, anything from reading this evening that you heard that you need any clarification on, or a highlight that stood out for you?
I think I was actually discussing about this with one of my friend who is a scientist and works in quantum theory. And so, but he is a very spiritual person. He believes in God. So what I have observed I'm not sure about West, but in India, most of the scientists are also very spiritual people. So I don't know how they maintain that balance in their life. But I asked him directly, like, do you believe in the Darwin's theory? And then he took some time and then he was like, yes. So I was like, then do you believe in God? And he was like, yes. So I was like, how is both possible? So he was like, we need to have a call to discuss this. We can't discuss this in message. So I still have to discuss with him. But yeah, it's a very interesting discussion, especially for our generation and people who are kind of studying science. It's very challenging sometimes to understand these things.
Rupanuga or Purnaprajna, you have a comment on that? How is it? It seems contradictory that one would say they accept Darwinism and they also believe in the existence.
Because in India, the situation's different. when Srila Prabhupada was still with us, there was a conference held, I think it was in Bombay, arranged by through Damodar. And he was lamenting that only 50 scientists showed up. And he said, I've invited many more. But imagine that, 50 scientists showing up in the West to a cultural event hosted by ISKCON or by a spiritual group. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. The people, these scientists in India, they cannot separate themselves from their tradition. They cannot separate themselves from their culture. Why? Because anyone born in India is already 50% Krishna conscious automatically. So how can that be purged? It stays there. Even they may get some technical education. Still, to have 50 scientists coming together here in this country for the same purpose, I can't imagine it.
Purnaprajna Prabhu, do you have a comment on that?
Well, I know amongst the Christian scientists in America, there are many that somehow reconcile their faith in Christianity and still accept, evolution. I don't think that it's actually logically possible, but people do it anyway.
Yeah, because good people don't want to give up their belief in God because of science, even if they're scientists. They want to hold on to that, even though they don't have much knowledge about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They're not atheists. That's one thing about America, that many people have so many different beliefs and everything, and they're backing up scientists. And even they may be breaking the directive principles as a matter of course, but they're still not atheists.
Yeah, and I also think in my previous discussions with him, we were discussing one day and he was like, everything what was proven in science one time has been contradicted by some other science theory, by some other scientist. So science is something which also keeps evolving. So tomorrow if somebody proves that Darwin theory is wrong and he's a scientist, it's not like that's not possible. There is a possibility of that as well. So I think science is something which is always evolving. So nothing is kind of universal and permanent.
Yes, but that science is after the cause of all causes. A few years ago, I remember one scientist got on, was being interviewed, and they were made some discussions about some subatomic particles. He said, well, we call this the God particle. They were still looking, for the cause of all causes.
Yeah. And I think 30 years back, nobody believed in quantum. And now everybody is kind of working towards quantum. So at one point, quantum was not in science. And today there is something like quantum. So I think every day there is some new invention coming on. So I don't think anything we can say that that's 100% universal law and it cannot be changed, or it's like the word of God.
Yeah, but you're still discussing material. You're still talking about gross material energy. They don't even know the subtle laws. So it's science is all dealing with gross material energy.
Yeah.
And if they just keep dealing with gross material energy, they're not going to end up concluding with the existence of God. You see, even though they can't explain why things happen, they can't prove anything, but they just won't come to the point where they admit in the mystic potency of the Supreme Lord, which is behind everything.
There is a drive to find out causality. So I guess that's an opportunity at some point that they might take an investigation past the material sphere, because that's actually where the cause is coming from. But they're looking for it, like you say, they're looking at it in gross things.
Yes.
Krishna Chandra, you've had your hand up for a long time.
Oh, yes. I just had a quick comment. Like that part that I read about the montage of all the scientists' quotes about humans being like flies. It kind of reminded me of a Bible verse in Matthew 10:31, where Jesus said that humans are more than sparrows. And I felt that these scientists' quotes were sort of a refutation to that. I felt that it was like, well, we believe in different. This is what Christians believe in. And you know, they are from Christian, you know, they're descended from Christians, they're Western scientists. So maybe on an emotional level, at least.
And then Dave, did you have a comment or question, or are you okay?
Yeah, I wanted to, I was just going to, I guess, how do you say? I was just going to say that I also follow the Friday, the Mayapur Tithi that way. I came in a bit late, but it's just interesting hearing about from like more in terms of material sciences, trying to, you know, find all the parallels. I appreciate this book because it can help increase knowledge of, you know, how spiritual science bridge with material science.
I realized that all the bluffing that I've been fighting for the last 2 years, exposing all the lies and propaganda of the jab, is actually been going on with Darwinism for decades and decades. It's not different, is it?
No, they're trying to depopulate the planet. So they're coming up with acidic programs and technologies to carry out that.
So we'll continue Friday then, whoever can make it. We just have 3 pages left, and I have a few things I wanted to bring forward, what Srila Prabhupada had to say about Charles Darwin, or if anyone else has something to share. But
I would like to say one thing.
Please.
When Bhagwat Maharaj was speaking in the beginning, he was saying that Prabhupada told Srila Damodar that in every cell there's a soul. But I've read all of the conversations, Srila Damodar and Prabhupada. Maybe I didn't read all the letters, but I have a doubt about that letter, and I will research it tonight, tomorrow. But I know from all the conversations, Prabhupada didn't say that there's a soul in every cell. Srila Damodar was asking about it, and Prabhupada was saying, sometimes, well, there may be, maybe not. You know, the thing is that that's not part of the Vedic understanding. There's no cell in the, you know, Vedic literatures. Prabhupada definitely didn't, yes, there's a soul in every cell. I think that's a misrepresentation.
I also agree with that. I think that the activities going on in the cell postulate more a presence of a higher intelligence of the spirit soul.
Yeah,
I think that's what
super
they're trying. That's what they super soul. They're trying to avoid higher intelligence because they know intelligence cannot be disembodied. And if you have a higher intelligence, then that means there's a person. And if you have a higher intelligence than theirs, that's a supreme person or a higher person. And that's the last thing they want to come up with. So we don't need.
But why? But why?
Bhagwat was talking about how all the consciousness of the individual cells, they influence the main soul, the person, you know. And that's all speculative. That was never.
Yes, absolutely. Because we have a subtle body. the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego, contains all the information from previous lives. And that whole thing is transferred to another body or another life. And Srila Prabhupada said, like with a heart transplant, someone asked him, what's happening? He said, it's just like you're sitting on a seat and somebody brings another chair for you to sit on. The soul stays there. So all the soul's past experiences is recorded in the subtle body, go with him to the next life. And then where he appears where and when he appears is the karmic result of his past behavior. There's no mention of influencing in the way that Bhagavad Maharaj is describing.
And also, I just want to give some concluding remark that in the book, I'm trying to point out that the refutation of the idea that life evolved from matter, that's what Prabhupada wanted. Prove that life did not evolve from matter. And it can be done in very simple ways. The complexity of the cell and the complexity of the human body. The fact that they've been trying to make a cell for 100 years and can't do it. And then all this other thing about, consciousness and the different consciousness influencing, and then this and that goes on forever, and you lose the central focus of what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is a simple thing. This is a nonsense. Life evolved from matter. It's not science. They may be able to see genes and chromosomes and how they're acting a little bit. They can see, but they can't see how life originated, nor can they imitate it in their laboratories. It's not science at all. It's just it's a religion.
The arrogance is that they don't want to think that there's something beyond their ability to understand by observation. Also,
They admit they can't understand they admit they can't understand the source of the information, but it's there and it's working in a very complex way. But they can't admit that source has to be higher intelligence than they, because they can't do it. They can't replicate one cell. Okay, so they have to. They will not admit that there's a higher form of information coming from a source higher than they are. See, that's the logical conclusion simply by their own eyeballs. You see, but because they're at heart atheists, they can't see it. Their intelligence has been stolen, according to Bhagavad Gita. Those people have lost their intelligence. And why? Huh?
They're rascals.
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's all.
I didn't hear you. Can you say it again?
Me?
Yes.
I just said they are rascals. Rascals.
Yeah, and why it's like when Srila Prabhupada said the people are less intelligent. Now, what does that mean scientifically? How can Srila Prabhupada say because they're less intelligent they can't understand? Scientifically, it's because the finer tissues of the brain have been destroyed by eating meat, flesh, all eggs, all these things destroy the finer tissues of the brain. Milk nourishes the finer tissues of the brain. But what does that mean? Higher spiritual thoughts, Srila Prabhupada said. These persons are not capable of higher spiritual thoughts because they're breaking the regular principles at every minute. They don't have the intelligence because it hasn't developed. Srila Prabhupada said that when young boys and girls associate closely, their intelligence is lost. So it begins very young.
it's lost in the current of attraction, like for enjoyment, material enjoyment.
Yes. So the evolution of the human being means tapa, means to sense control, to understand the purpose of life, and to use one's higher intelligence for spiritual pursuit. To become, we're conscious of so many things. The human consciousness is created for consciousness of God. That's what it's for. The human consciousness is so developed. And so instead of becoming conscious of everything else, what about becoming conscious of God? Well, they don't believe in God, so their consciousness doesn't go that far. Why? Because it's been stolen. Their intelligence has been stolen. Because intelligence comes from the Supreme Lord. He says that, Shabbat says in the second canto, Lord of the Heart, that intelligence is a form direction of the supersoul. And that includes conscience. That includes intuition. These are actually coming from supersoul. See? But they don't want to admit that anything comes from anywhere except their own fertile brain.
I am leaving.
Thank you very much. I hope to see. Thank you, Rupanuga, for making me aware. I thought in our Toronto calendar it said Gaur Purnima is tomorrow. I didn't realize it's actually Friday. Thank you. So if anyone's not attending at some temple, I look forward to being with you on Friday night. We'll finish. Please accept my respectful obeisances.
Lord Shabbat.
Jeruvia Vipasindhu Vya Eva Chapati Tanam Pavanipo Vaishnavyo Namo Namaha.
Prabhupada ki jai.
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 Hari Hari Bol.